Hi, this is Renee Tuga, and I'm sitting in the woods behind my parents' house in Nova Scotia. Often I make these videos in my own backyard in Montreal, in my garden, or sometimes in my travels, different places. But I'm in the woods, which is one of my favorite places to be. So I have some, I guess, news or a plan to share that I thought about writing about it, and I still will, I'm sure, be doing quite a bit of writing about it in the years to come. As many of you know, I live in Montreal, and my family has been living there for 6 years now. And before we lived in Montreal, we lived on the Gaspé Peninsula of Quebec for 4 years. And before that, we were in New England, 9 years in Maine, 2 years in New Jersey. And before that, we were in Alberta, we as in my husband and I. That's where I grew up. I was born and raised in Alberta. I met my husband at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And then we got married there, and we had our first child in Alberta. And then we moved to the United States when our first child was 1 year old, and we never moved back to Alberta. We stayed in the East. We are as surprised about that as anybody else is. And and then we ended up in Quebec after leaving the United States. And we've been in Quebec for 10 years now, Gaspé Peninsula in Montreal. And when we moved to Montreal 6 years ago, we felt at the time, at least, that it was temporary. It was for a season. I mean, these things change, right? You don't know how things are going to evolve as you go. But for us, it felt like a season of life to live there. Other places that we've lived, like when we were in Maine, I mean, you're in a season, but we had bought a house and we were planning to stay, but immigration issues made it so that we had decided to move. When we moved to the Gaspé, we weren't thinking about it as a season so much. We were thinking about it as a potential place that we would end up with our family and make a home in the woods. We had a lot of dreams about that, a home in the woods on the side of a mountain. And then we ended up moving to Montreal for reasons that I've written about quite a bit. And I can leave links to that. We ended up moving to Montreal. And when we moved to Montreal, when our kids were in their teen years, 16, 14, and 12, we went into Montreal with a seasonal mindset, more so than other places that we've lived, which we thought, we didn't know how long we'd be in those other places, but we were really our intention in moving to Montreal was that it was for a season. Kind of finishing the active parenting years of raising children. Montreal has a lot to offer in terms of cultural and artistic and technology and employment options in the fields that our children were showing aptitude and interest in the arts and video gaming and different things like that. It also Quebec in general has the cheapest post-secondary tuition rates in all of Canada, and Canada has reasonable, affordable post-secondary education to begin with, and Quebec has even cheaper, and we pay for that in our taxes. But knowing that we had 3 kids and we wanted to help them through all of their post-secondary journeys, but we weren't able to necessarily, contribute financially to their tuition in all of those cases. 3 kids going in various different places would be more than we would be able to manage. But we're like, well, if we live somewhere where they can go to school and everyone can find a school that is good for their shifty, that's good for their interests and desires, and if they can get their post-secondary education here at an affordable rate, and then they can live at home. That's the part of the affordability. They can live at home, and it just felt like a good option for our family, for us to help our kids launch into adulthood with the tools and the education and the resources that they needed. So that's what we moved there for. We were like, this is a place to finish off this parenting journey and get our kids launched from. So that's how we ended up in Montreal. We had already been in Quebec, so and that's a whole nother story of why we ended up in Quebec, but we'd already been in Quebec, so Montreal was a good option for us. But we've known in living there, Damien and I, that it was not, at least when we went in, we didn't think that was where we were going to stay forever. And that feeling has persisted. So those things can change as you are through time. Maybe we would have been like, yes, we love it here. We want to stay forever and ever. We want to make this our home. That never happened. In the time of living in Montreal, we have been making the most of it. And we truly love the city. Like, really, as far as cities go, it is one of the most interesting and vibrant and wonderful cities, I think, in all of North America to live in. I would recommend Montreal as a amazing city to live to anyone who's interested in the city living. And culturally, it has that dynamic of being a French. Well, the city itself is pretty bilingual, but it's in a French culture. So there's just so much interesting stuff going on there. But having said all that, we've known for a while that we weren't going to stay permanently in Montreal. We have an apartment there we rent. And Montreal has been a very affordable place to live. It's it's just one of the most affordable cities in Canada. And it's a great city. But housing prices have been going up. So even if we had been thinking, well, even if we don't want to live here full time, do we want to buy something here and, maybe rent it out later, or like rent it to the kids? We considered those different things, but it was always like, no, this is not where we want to do that. Although we tossed around those ideas. So point is, we knew we weren't going to stay in Montreal. I need to be in nature more than what the city offers. And so we thought about, well, maybe we'll get a place in the Laurentians and then have a apartment in the city for a while to continue to supporting the kids so that they can live there while they go to school, and we'll have a place in the Laurentians. The Laurentians, for those of you who aren't familiar, is just this mountain range, not big mountains, part of the Appalachian mountain range, which are lower elevation mountains, just outside of the city, just northwest a bit, and northeast, so north of the city. We thought, well, maybe we'll go there and we will have a place there, and then it'll be a place that the kids can come to, and and then we'll also have some kind of like toehold in the city. That was another option for us. We started looking down that. We've been looking at that route for the past couple years. Like, well, where would we maybe want to live here in the Laurentians, or maybe even the Eastern Townships, which is another beautiful area. Basically kind of the looking around where we might want to buy a place and make that a more permanent home. So this is one thing going on, okay? That's one part of the story. Then the other part of the story here is that for at least a decade now, I'm gonna say a decade, maybe it's more like 8 to 9 years, but I have known that in my heart, and started to talk with Damien and talking about our future and what the future will look like for us. It has been my intention that when my parents are elderly, they're in their late 60s now, but they are not elderly. When they are of old age and they need care and they need somebody to be there with them, not necessarily providing all the everyday, like really personal and intimate care that they might need, but just, they need someone to help drive them to their appointments because maybe they're not driving anymore. Someone to keep an eye on them more closely, and be there. And then the continuity of that through to their end of life. I want to be that person. And that's just been my intention and my heart. So I knew that end of life for my parents, I wanted to be with them. And not just the very end, but like, we don't know how long, like, the decline in health and decline in capabilities will be. So it could be years, right? So that was another piece. So we have the like, where will we live after Montreal? And then we have the wanting to be with my parents and provide care for them and companionship and be with them in their later years. And then we have the other piece. There's probably more than just 3 pieces, but another piece here is that we had a property in Maine, and when we moved to Quebec 10 years ago, we kept that property. We couldn't sell it because when we bought the house, it was at the height of the housing bubble. It was like 2006, I think, and the market crashed in 2008, and we could not sell our house for what we owed on it for many years. So when we left and we moved back to Canada, we rented it. We had a property manager. We had a upstairs suite. It was it was a 2-family house, a basement suite, and like the rest of the house upstairs, 2 levels were another suite, and it paid for itself. We could pay the mortgage, pay the expenses on it, and that was working really well for a few years. And it was, definitely a stress managing that from this far, and just there was a lot of work involved for me with that, but it was the property that we owned, and we were hoping that at least that we could sell it at the minimum. It would have been great to just be able to sell it and break even after the housing crisis. But what ended up happening was that we lost tenants. We had tenants stay in there and not pay their rent. And depending on the laws, tenancy laws of the state, that can be a very difficult situation for landlords. And everyone talks about like how, oh, that's great for when you're on the side of the renter, you don't want to be abused by a landlord, right? We were not abusive landlords at all. We provided a very nice home for people to live in, and they took advantage of that. And we had renters living there, basically become squatters and didn't pay their rent, and the process to evict them was a long one, and we could not sustain that anymore financianly, and we had to foreclose. We had to be like, we are stopping to pay our mortgage. We can't pay the mortgage on this anymore because our renters are not paying us. We couldn't get new people in there. It was a very bad situation. And so we stopped paying the mortgage and we foreclosed. I guess that's like the language around this. We were like, to the bank, just were like, it's yours, you can have it. We can't own this anymore. Okay, so I had to finish recording that bit, the first part, yesterday, and then I had a meeting. So I'm back to finishing the story now, which is why I'm wearing something different, and maybe the light looks a little bit different. So let's cut to the end of where we were at. The property that we owned in Maine, where we lived ourselves for 6 years and then rented out for another 6 years. We owned it altogether 12 or 13 years, and that ended in foreclosure. We lost a property that could have been used to then put down, the down payment on the next one, right? Like, this is how it's supposed to work. And the good thing in this is that because that was down in the States and we have a completely separate financial thing going on up here in Canada, and different credit history, like it didn't affect our credit history. So it wasn't the same kind of loss as it would have been. So that was a good thing. But there was still, for me, there was a lot of shame involved in that. Feelings of, loss and shame, and just if you follow these steps of ownership or progression through adulthood, like then you buy this property and then you can sell it and then you can get the next one. And that broke down for us. So didn't work. And maybe it didn't work because of obviously some of the choices that we made, but also just the housing crisis that happened in 2008 in the United States definitely impacted us, and we lost. So we are in our late 40s. We're in our late 40s, and we don't own any property. We have nothing in savings that way. We have no equity or property. So what this means is that whatever we do at the next stage, we're kind of starting from scratch. So that all ended for us about 2 years ago, losing the house in Maine and just realizing that was going to be a loss in our lives, in our smack dab in midlife, or I should say the beginning of midlife or whatever, right in our mid-40s. And then the pandemic hit, and the pandemic revealed a lot of things. It was that apocalyptic experience for so many of us, and it revealed, first of all, city living during the pandemic was pretty terrible. There's like a lot of things that you can access in a city, but when the best parts of living in a city for us were not accessible, allowed, operational, etc., during the pandemic. The best parts being all the things that you can do and the access you have to things, and that all shut down, and it was all done digitally, virtually. You realize city living was not great during the pandemic, and we weren't committed to city living long-term anyways, but that was the one thing that was revealed. Another thing revealed during the pandemic was the state of care in long-term care homes for the elderly primarily, and just, at least in Canada where we live, the disproportionate mortality, effects in those situations, and also that just kind of a revealing of what those living conditions were like for elderly people, and just this, it was a really this revealing of society's values, everything from what essential workers are paid, right? What the people working in these care homes are paid, and the kind of care that they were or were not able to provide during the pandemic. Plus, that period of time where people could not visit their loved ones in these facilities. And that just reaffirmed for me my own desires and intentions and decisions around caring for my parents for as long as I can, and just being close. I just realized just the importance of my goals that way, and the importance of people caring for one another. And caregiving was, it just was really highlighted to me during that time how important this is. So yeah, the pandemic revealed these things, and it kind of and it really constricted our lives in the city, and it helped with this whole decision making, that process that we were in about where we would end up after Montreal. And another thing about the pandemic was I want to say the trial run, not really a trial run, but how it showed, like, during societal crisis and upheaval, what things might look like. And knowing that with climate change happening and more on the horizon, coming, it's coming, it's happening. And getting a sense during the pandemic of, like, okay, we're gonna have to be dealing with crisis and upheaval as a society, and the question, asking ourselves, where do we want to do that as a couple, as a family? Where do we want to be experiencing that together, and also working towards our long-term security in that sense, for that eventual current and eventual change. So considering all those factors, our intention to live in Montreal for a season of our lives, the eventual plan and commitment to care for my parents, and the loss of our property in Maine, and the financial loss that was to us, and what that meant, for us financially at this stage of our lives. We had some decision making to do around where are we going to go next after the time in Montreal ends, and anticipating that will end as a full-time residence for us sometime in the next 4 years. So I'm in school right now, and part of the reason I started school is because I knew I would be there for a while, because we want to be there, we want to have the apartment and have a home for our children there until our youngest is done undergraduate. So at the end of that, we had to decide, what are we going to do after that, and what are we going to do now in terms of our finances and our planning and all this. What are we going to do now for that time? And we were looking at different places in Quebec that we might want to buy a property and maybe build something in the mountains. I've always wanted to live in the mountains. This has been a goal and a dream and a desire of mine. We were looking at different places that we might do that. And then we started to think through all the factors that were a part of our decision making, and realized that, we're kind of starting over again at this age, and it's hard to build something that we could then bring my parents into in their old age, because that was one of the things we're thinking, that they could come live with us and we can care for them there. But we don't have anything yet going. We are starting again in terms of house ownership. So that's a factor. Another factor is that living in Quebec, we'd have to be very careful about where we were to live in terms of being able to have enough English resources if my parents were to have to come live with us, and we were to care for them that way. There'd have to be enough of an English community and resources for them. And my French is not great either, and I think about that for my future. But I have more time to learn, and I am learning. So I figured I could get there if I needed to, but my parents won't be able to. So we were looking at those factors and realized that my parents already have a lot going on for them in Nova Scotia. They've got a property here, acreage, they have a house, they have resources in terms of my dad's a builder. He does this kind of thing, and we realized that really Nova Scotia needs to be the place that we come to after being in Montreal, and that we think about setting our sights for the future here. And I mean, it feels like, oh, that's kind of obvious, it almost feels obvious, but there was a lot of things to consider and different things that we want out of life. And so it wasn't necessarily obvious, but after making the decision, does feel more obvious. So when we came to this realization, Damien and I, and looking at our future, we talked to my parents, and they we're talking to them about like what are the possibilities in terms of, given all these factors, what's possible for us in terms of coming to Nova Scotia. What can we do as a family? What can we do together here? And in that conversation with my parents, we decided that we would move to the property that they have here, and that they will build another home. Their I don't know, old age home, their elderly retirement home, I don't know what we call these things, but they're going to build another home that they can then move into, and then that Damien and I can live in their current home, and that will be kind of home base for our family. And it will be all of that will happen on their current property here in Nova Scotia. And we will, I guess, make this the family compound, the place that the family is based out of. I'm still adjusting to this idea. I am, even the process of making this video and explaining it gives me butterflies. Like just sitting here and talking about this and knowing that I'm gonna put this out there publicly gives me butterflies. I'm not exactly sure. It's because it wasn't always obvious to me that this was gonna be the way things would play out. And we've talked about a lot of options. Also, we're talking here about a transition and seeing a family through different stages of life, and through life, and also into old age and old age care and what that looks like. And those are conversations I feel that we don't have a lot in this culture. And so it kind of feels weird to put that out there. Like it actually feels weird to be talking publicly about like, this is what we're planning for when my parents are old. This is what we're planning for when, I get older. I'm not there yet, but those are conversations that we'll be having also. And it also feels strange to talk about a bit because of the incredible good fortune I have to have parents who have property, who have skills, the resources. Like my dad builds houses. He builds things. Is what he does. So to have that is such a gift. And so it feels kind of weird to talk about that because it's a privilege that not very many people have, and I recognize that. So this isn't like this is not and here's how you can plan for your own future and your parents' future, because it's not at all. It's not. This is the sharing my own story and journey, which is all that it's ever been for me in terms of my writing and my stuff I'm doing on video now. So that's the thing. Our visit here right now is not like necessarily related to that. We didn't come here to visit because we've made this decision. I mean, this would have been a thing I would have done anyways, but it's adds new meaning to it because you look at things differently. My parents' house is going to someday be my house. That's unbelievable for me. So that's a hard one to process. Yeah, you just look at things differently and you experience things a little differently with that plan in place. So nothing is changing for the immediate future. We're in Montreal and kids are going to school and I'm going to school and that's where we live. But at some point in the not too distant future, we will be moving to Nova Scotia as our permanent home base. And from here, the goal, at least now, the intention now is that this will be home base, but we will be traveling. And that's a whole nother story and other things that we're making plans for in terms of how to make that more possible in terms of tools and resources and things. So we will be traveling and spending seasons in other places because I'm not ready to settle full-time here. There's places I want to go and things I want to do, and really seasons of my life that I want to spend other places and enjoying the things that those places have to offer, especially winter and snow and mountains. And I want to access and live those experiences as much as possible. So that's the thing. Yeah, one day we're going to end up here, and we'll start a new adventure. That adventure's already being started in the conversations, in the actual division of property, in the planning of new house building, in the discussions that we are having as a family. And I just wanted to let you all know about that as people who either maybe read my blog, who follow this Instagram account, or perhaps YouTube. This might go on YouTube. Family members who might see this. That's the news. That's the plans, the intentions. Thanks for watching.